Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is time for another true crime video yet again, and today we will be talking about the curious case of Lina Medina, the youngest mother in history. Lina Marcela Medina was born on September 23rd, 1933 in a small village in Peru. Her father, Tiborello, was a silversmith while her mother, Victoria, was a full-time stay-at-home mom. Lina was one of 9 children, so this was a pretty big family. She was described to be a normal girl who was always happy to be playing with her friends, her cousins, and her siblings, despite all the hardships in life. However, this would all change before Lina had even turned 6. When she was 5.5 years old, her parents started to notice a few changes in her body. Her abdomen started to grow rapidly, and due to this, her posture changed drastically as well. And she was tiny, she was only 5, and yet her stomach was getting way too big for her size. Worried, her parents, of course, took her to the doctor. At first, they were terrified, thinking that there was something definitely wrong with their daughter. Tiborello and Victoria suspected that something might have been growing inside of Lina, whether it be a parasite or even maybe a tumor, and they were correct. Something was definitely growing inside of her. However, it wasn't really what they expected it to be. Dr. Gerardo Lozada performed a routine checkup on Lina, also curious as to what was happening to the little girl. And after multiple tests, he told the parents that their 5.5-year-old daughter was pregnant. To be more specific, she was already on her 7th month of pregnancy. So, which means that in less than 2 months, this 5.5-year-old girl would become a mother. And of course, this sounded outrageous to Tiborello and Victoria, thinking that this was impossible and was most probably a mistake by a doctor who had no idea what he was doing. So they went ahead and visited another doctor to get a second opinion. Now, once this second doctor ran tests on Lina, he had the same conclusion. She was indeed 7 months pregnant and was going to give birth in a matter of a few weeks. The parents could not believe what was happening. If Lina was 5.5 years old and was already 7 months pregnant, that could only mean one thing. Someone took advantage of their young child and got her pregnant even before she turned 5 years old. I mean, she was a baby. What kind of a monster could have done this? They had all of these questions, and then finally, an arrest was made. Tiborello Medina, Lina's own father, was taken into custody after Dr. Lozada reported him to the authorities, suspecting him of raping his own child. Tiborello was detained for some time, but after a few weeks of investigation and finding no concrete evidence against him, he was then released. Now, I am not sure if they conducted a paternity test because it was developed a few years prior to this, more specifically in 1925, although it only became widely used in the 1980s. But that was the end of that. Tiborello was ruled out as a suspect. Now, still thinking that it could have been someone around Lina or close to her, the next suspect was a cousin of hers who was older but was mentally stunted. There's not a lot of information about this, but again, there was not enough evidence to file a case against this cousin, and he was also eventually released from police custody. Now, Lina was of course interviewed by multiple people. The authorities, her doctors, as well as her parents kept on asking her questions multiple times. However, at the age of 5.5, she couldn't really comprehend what was going on. She didn't even understand what pregnancy was. She didn't know where babies came from. And yet here she was, about to have a baby herself. As a very young child who went through something very horrific and traumatic, she simply could not provide precise information to point to who the father was. But on May 14th, 1939, Lina Marcela Medina, who was now 5 years and 8 months old, gave birth to a healthy baby boy via C-section. They named her baby Gerardo after Dr. Lozada, who took great care of her during her journey. Baby Gerardo turned out to be a very healthy and happy baby boy. And Lina, of course, had to have a C-section because she was tiny and her pelvis wasn't completely developed enough to support a natural birth. But luckily, there were no complications for her nor her baby. Now, after giving birth, Lina was further examined. How could a child this young get pregnant? It was then discovered that Lina developed extremely early. She had a precocious puberty, which meant that puberty occurred for her in an unusually early age. The doctors also found out that while Lina's pelvis hadn't developed fully and wasn't strong enough for her to have a normal delivery, the rest of her reproductive organs had already fully developed. It was also discovered that Lina actually had her first menstrual cycle when she was only 8 months old. And here I was thinking that mine started super early at 10 years old. 8 months. She was an infant. I mean, at 8 months, she probably couldn't speak or walk yet. And yet, she was already having her cycle. Dr. Edmundo Escomel, who also found out about this, studied Lina's situation and actually reported her case in a medical journal called La Presse Medicale. 6-year-old Lina Medina became some sort of a medical marvel, and a lot of people from around the world wanted to interview her and even make documentaries and movies about her. However, her parents did a great job in protecting not only Lina and Gerardo's privacy but their childhood as well. Tiborello and Victoria refused any sort of media attention and was successful in letting these kids just be kids. Dr. Lozada also kept an eye on Lina and her son, almost becoming an unofficial guardian for the both of them. Lina and Gerardo were initially raised as siblings, as Lina couldn't take care of her baby on her own. But they did grow up very close. It wasn't until he was 10 when Gerardo finally learned the truth that Lina was actually his mother and not his sister. A few years after this, when Lina was around 17 years old, Dr. Lozada offered her a job at his clinic. She became his secretary while continuing her studies, and aside from getting her own education, she was also able to provide for Gerardo's high school studies. Now, at the age of 33, Lina got married to a man named Raul Jurado. They had a son in 1972, but sadly, just a few years later, in 1979, Lina's eldest son, Gerardo, passed away due to bone marrow cancer. He was only 40 years old. Lina is currently 89 years old and still lives a quiet life in Peru. There are still a lot of media people trying to reach out and get an interview, but she refuses to talk to any of them. Up until now, nobody knows for sure who Gerardo's biological father was. I mean, it is possible that Lina knows or remembers and she just doesn't want to dig up the past, and that is something that we have to respect. I mean, it is her decision anyways because it is her life. It's also possible that she really has no idea or any memory of what actually transpired. I mean, she wasn't even 5 yet when she was sexually assaulted. People around their area concluded that it could have been a local man who got very drunk at a festival and did all of this to Lina when no one was watching or when everyone else was busy preparing for festivities. But again, that is just a rumor and we can never know for sure. Now, you might be wondering why I chose to talk about this when no one was ever held responsible. And that is exactly why. A little girl was raped and had to become a mother before she was even 6 years old, before she even started going to school. A crime was obviously committed here, and while I do respect Lina's wishes to keep things private, I am talking about this because I want to raise awareness. I am not making this video to find out who fathered Gerardo. I'm not here to find out who got Lina pregnant because she doesn't want that. However, I am doing this for the parents, for awareness, for the kids. Never trust anyone with your children. And this is not me putting the blame on her parents. Victoria had 9 kids to take care of. But please always think about your child's safety. If you feel something is off about someone, never ever leave your kids with them. It doesn't matter if this person is a relative, a close friend, a neighbor, or a complete stranger. It doesn't matter because there are a lot of sick people out there who do sick things to children, the people who least deserve it. It is sad and scary to admit, but these sick people are everywhere. And they're not even hiding anymore. They're hiding in plain sight. Sadly, these things are still happening to this day. There are a lot of people out there who are evil enough to take advantage of a child's innocence. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much all that I have for this video. As usual, I would love to hear your thoughts on this case, and should there be any other case that you would like for me to cover, please let me know by leaving a comment. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys on my next video. Sorry if I'm sweating like a pig. It is very hot in this room. Bye, guys.